A young millionaire heading to an important meeting spotted a beggar with a baby in the rain. Without hesitation, he gave her the keys to his house. When he returned, he entered without knocking and was horrified by what he saw. It was a bustling day in Leon, Mexico, and as Ruben navigated the hall of one of the country's most significant architecture events, the contrast between the luxury around him and the purpose of the night's event was striking. Although filled with glamour and ostentation, the event was actually a charitable one, organized to raise funds for social housing projects. Renowned architects, including Ruben, had donated designs and plans for these projects, and the evening was dedicated to raising resources to turn these plans into reality, where the elite had the opportunity to contribute significantly to society. Although for some, it was just another occasion to showcase their wealth and status, Ruben didn't go unnoticed. Known as one of the most talented architects, his presence was as striking as the projects he signed. Despite his success, people commented on the change in his personality after the sudden loss of his young wife in an accident and the fact that he cared for his sick father. Some saw him as a cold man, but those who truly understood the weight of life knew it was just his way of facing adversity. Amid the event, Ruben encountered Sandra, an iconic figure in architecture respected for her vast experience and achievements in the field. "Ruben, it's always notable to see a professional of your caliber here," she said with a piercing look. "I've heard that despite your intense work, you've dedicated yourself to caring for your father. That's admirable." He smiled politely, nodding, but couldn't help feeling like a stranger in that world of appearances, sensing his discomfort. Sandra commented, "These events can be superficial, but sometimes they reveal more than we expect. What brings you here today, Ruben? It doesn't seem to be just for professional contacts." Ruben gave a sad smile. "My presence here is more of a duty than a desire, you know. My life was never just about architecture. It was shaped by much more human experiences and lessons I learned from my father." Ruben paused, recalling the difficult days. "My father, despite the difficulties, always found ways to help others. He was a simple man, but with a huge heart. He raised me alone, and every sacrifice he made was a life lesson for me." Sandra listened attentively, her expression reflecting respect. "It's rare to find someone who holds such values, especially after achieving the success you have. Your father must be an incredible man." "He is," Ruben responded with a proud gleam in his eyes. "He did everything he could to support us, from fixing things for the neighbors to giving private lessons. He always said that a man's true wealth is not in what he possesses, but in what he can offer to others." Sandra nodded, understanding the depth of Ruben's words. "That explains a lot about who you are, Ruben, and how you lead your life and career. Many here could learn from that." Ruben smiled, thanking Sandra. "I just try to live in a way that would make my father proud. He taught me that the true architecture of life lies in building bridges between people, in creating spaces of understanding and support." Sandra smiled with genuine admiration. She too had started her life very simply, studied hard, and reached one of the highest levels of the profession. But despite everything, she had a sadness in the depths of her gaze. She had not formed a family, and that part of her life remained very private. After leaving the architecture event, Ruben headed home, a place that had become more of a refuge than simply a living space. Upon arrival, he found his father, who now lived with him due to his illness, watching a late-night program. Despite health challenges, Mr. Gonzalo maintained a vibrant spirit and an active mind. "How was the event, son?" he asked with an interested look. "Did you manage to raise enough?" "It was quite successful, despite the atmosphere of people who think they're gods because of their money," Ruben replied, sitting next to his father. After the conversation, Ruben helped his father settle in for the night. "Dad, tomorrow morning I have to travel for that meeting about the new project. I'll leave everything organized here, and Mrs. Martinez promised to check in on you. Consuelo, this is the key to my father's house. It's nearby. He's living with me for now, so the house is empty. You can stay there with your daughter," Ruben said, extending the bunch of keys to her. "I need to go now because I have a meeting, but my driver will take you there." After handing the keys to Consuelo, Ruben quickly returned to the car, already soaked by the rain. "I'll continue on foot to the meeting. Please take Consuelo and her daughter to my father's house. It's nearby. Also, make a stop at the market and buy everything they need. Food, clothes, diapers, anything. Ruben instructed the driver. The driver, familiar with Ruben's acts of kindness, promptly agreed. You can trust me, Mr. Ruben. I'll take care of everything. After bidding farewell to him, Ruben went back to where Consuelo was sheltered from the rain with her daughter. As he approached, he said kindly, "Let's go. Don't worry. I'll take you to a safe place. Mr. Ruben wants to help you and your daughter." However, Consuelo looked at the driver with a mixture of fear and distrust. "I don't know you, and I've seen on TV what can happen. I can't trust like this," she said, clutching her daughter tightly. Ruben could sense her apprehension and understood the challenge ahead. With her daughter against her chest, the driver understood her agitation and tried to reassure her. "I understand your fear, but I assure you, Mr. Ruben is a kind-hearted man who just wants to help." To demonstrate his sincerity, he opened his wallet and showed some photos of his own family. "See, I'm also a father. I've been working with Mr. Ruben for years. He's truly someone who cares about others." Consuelo observed the photos and the driver's sincere expression, still cautious but feeling that perhaps this was a genuine opportunity for refuge and safety. Finally, she agreed to go with him. Carefully, she entered the car, shielding her daughter from the rain, while the driver took care of driving them to Ruben's father's house. But before that, they stopped by a market to buy food and diapers for the baby. At the end of the day, after a long and productive meeting, Ruben left the building to find his driver waiting for him. As soon as he got into the car, Ruben asked, "How did it go for Consuelo and the girl? Did they make it to my father's house?" The driver responded, "Yes, Mr. Ruben, but I dropped them off at the beginning of the street. I thought it would be easier to maneuver the car." Ruben, slightly surprised by the driver's decision, lightly reprimanded him. "You should have dropped them off at the door, especially with this rain and a little girl." He paused for a moment, reflecting. "But it's okay. It's been a busy day for all of us. I'll stop by there tomorrow to see how they are and make sure they have everything they need." As they drove through the streets, Ruben's concern for Consuelo and her daughter weighed heavily on his mind. Upon arriving home, Ruben was greeted by Mrs. Ramirez, who took care of his father in his absence. She seemed to have unexpected news to share. "Mr. Ruben, your father, Mr. Gonzalo, took a copy of the keys to your house and went there as soon as you left. He said he wanted to spend a few days there. He was feeling bored and a little better." Ruben was surprised by the news. He went alone, but he knows he shouldn't. Ruben's worry for his father's health and safety grew. Mrs. Ramirez interrupted. "Yes, he went alone. He said he waited for you to leave because he knew you wouldn't let him go otherwise. He seemed determined and said he felt well enough to be alone for a few days." Upon hearing about his father's sudden decision to go to the other house where Consuelo and her daughter were sheltered, Ruben immediately thought of possible complications. Without hesitation, he asked the driver to take him there urgently. As the car sped through the streets, worry filled his chest. Upon arriving at the house, Ruben saw the door open and an ambulance parked outside. His heart raced as he saw his father being loaded onto a stretcher. Ruben ran inside, panicked, trying to understand what was happening. He approached the paramedics and introduced himself. "I'm his son. What happened?" The doctor, looking at Ruben, calmly explained, "Your father had a stroke. Fortunately, his wife was here and acted quickly. She called the ambulance. She saved his life." Ruben felt a whirlwind of emotions: relief that his father was alive, gratitude that Consuelo was there, and deep fear for what could have happened. He accompanied the stretcher to the ambulance, determined to be by his father's side in this critical moment. Still shaken, he watched as the doctor took his father away in the ambulance. As soon as the vehicle departed for the hospital, he turned back to the house looking for Consuelo and her daughter. Ruben approached Consuelo and her daughter, trying to calm his nerves after the scare with his father, but the worry was still evident on his face. "Consuelo, I don't know how to thank you for everything you did. The doctor thought you were my wife," Ruben said, trying to ease the tension of the moment with a faint smile. Consuelo, sensing the seriousness of the situation, responded gently, "There's nothing to thank, Mr. Ruben. I did what anyone would do. I was in the right place at the right time." Ruben observed the groceries she had bought, noticing that they were only basic items. I see you only bought the essentials. You could have taken more, you know. You don't have to limit yourself, he said, concerned if she had everything she needed. Consuelo looked at him, a mix of gratitude and excitement in her eyes. I didn't want to abuse your generosity. You've already done so much for us, she said, tears welling in her eyes. There's no way I can thank you enough. You're giving me more than just help. You're giving me hope. There was a moment of silence during which Consuelo looked at Ruben, a thought forming in her mind. May I ask if you're married, Ruben? Ruben sighed, a shadow passing over his face. I was. My wife passed away in an accident just a month after our marriage. That was 3 years ago. Consuelo brought her hand to her mouth, surprised and saddened by the revelation. I'm so sorry, Ruben. I had no idea, she said. Ruben nodded slightly. It's okay. It was difficult, but I learned to live with it. The pain never fully goes away, but we learn to move on, right? Consuelo nodded, feeling an unexpected connection with Ruben through their shared experiences of loss and struggle. Ruben stood up, taking his keys. Well, I have to go now, but please feel comfortable here. And if you need anything at all, call me. Thank you, Ruben, Consuelo said, sincerely, nodding her head with a sad smile on her lips. Take care, Consuelo, and remember, you're not alone. With those words, he left, leaving Consuelo sitting wrapped in a mixture of gratitude, hope, and a newfound sense of companionship. With a new sense of not being so isolated in the world, Ruben returned home, his mind filled with thoughts about his encounter with Consuelo and her story. The next day, he visited his father in the hospital. His father was in stable condition, but still needed constant care. Sitting beside his father's hospital bed, Ruben began to tell him about Consuelo and her daughter, recounting the details of the day she felt unwell and how she was the one who called the doctor and saved Mr. Ramirez. Additionally, he spoke about how difficult her life had been. Ruben's father listened attentively, his face showing signs of emotion. You did a very good thing, son. Consuelo seems to be an incredible and brave woman, he said weakly, but with pride. It's good to see that you have grown into a good-hearted man. I thank God for not abandoning me when I asked for the strength to raise you. There was a comfortable silence between them, each lost in their thoughts. Then Ruben's father, looking pensive, spoke again. Don't you think it would be better to bring Consuelo and the baby to live closer to us? They could stay in our house. I would like to have more life around me, and you wouldn't have to travel so much to see them. Ruben reflected on the suggestion. The idea of bringing Consuelo and her daughter closer seemed welcoming, and the possibility of his father having more company at home was also appealing. It's a good idea, Dad. I'll talk to Consuelo about it. I think their presence would bring more joy to our home, Ruben replied with a smile. His father, excited about the possibility, said, It would be wonderful to have a girl in the house. It's always very quiet when you're working. With that new idea in mind, Ruben bid farewell to his father, promising to seriously consider the proposal and discuss it with Consuelo. He left the hospital feeling hopeful, thinking about the possibilities the future could bring for them. After a long day of work on a major project, Ruben was exhausted but determined. He drove to the house where Consuelo was staying, thinking about the proposal he had in mind. Upon arrival, he found Consuelo arranging some things in the living room, with the baby playing quietly on the floor. Consuelo, I have something important to discuss with you, Ruben began, sitting down nearby. Consuelo looked at him curiously. What's the matter, Ruben? She asked. Ruben took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. My house is spacious, and since my father got sick, it has been very quiet. He enjoys reading a lot, and I thought since you also enjoy it, you could keep each other company. Besides, he could help you with your studies if you wish. Consuelo seemed surprised by the proposal. You mean live in your house, me and my daughter? Ruben nodded. Yes, it would be amazing to have your presence and the babies at home. I think it would be good for my father. He would feel less lonely, and you would have a safe place to stay, along with access to all the books you want. Consuelo fell silent for a moment, clearly reflecting on the offer. That would be incredible, Ruben. I don't know how to thank you. It would be a great help for me and my daughter, and I would love to study more. Ruben felt relieved and happy with her response. Then it's settled. Let's do it. I think it will be good for all of us." With a grateful smile, Consuelo accepted the proposal and hurried to gather her things and those of her daughter. Once they were done, they returned to Ruben's house, her heart filled with hope for the opportunity to study and become someone in life. As they entered the house, Consuelo couldn't hide her surprise. "Wow, Ruben, your house is amazing. You're really a talented architect," she exclaimed, looking around in admiration. Ruben smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Consuelo. I hope you and your daughter feel comfortable here." In the following days, the relationship between Consuelo and Mr. Ramirez, Ruben's father, became increasingly close. He had a vast collection of books, and with great enthusiasm, he began to show Consuelo the ones he considered most interesting. Mr. Ramirez picked up an old book and said, "This was one of my favorites when I was younger. I think you'll like it." Consuelo took the book, flipping through its yellowed pages. "It seems fascinating. Thank you for sharing this with me, Mr. Ramirez." Realizing the special connection forming between them and Consuelo's dedication, Ruben decided to dispense with his father's caregiver. Consuelo had insisted on taking care of Mr. Ramirez when Ruben wasn't home, caring for him with a mix of respect and affection, and Mr. Ramirez greatly appreciated her company and that of her daughter. Consuelo always emphasized how much she enjoyed her new life. "I really enjoy taking care of your father, Ruben. He has been so kind to me and my daughter. It's the least I can do." Ruben thanked her with a nod. "You are already part of the family, Consuelo. My father and I are very grateful to have you and your daughter here." As Consuelo settled into Ruben's house, he made sure to offer her not only a home, but also financial independence. One day while they were talking in the kitchen, Ruben broached the subject. "Consuelo, I've been thinking. I would like to pay you a salary. You've been amazing taking care of my father and the house, and I think it's important that you have your own income." Consuelo looked surprised. "Ruben, that's not necessary. You're already providing a home and everything my daughter and I need." Ruben insisted. "I know, but it's important to me that you feel free and independent. I want you to be able to buy what you need for yourself and your daughter without having to ask." Consuelo felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Ruben. This means a lot to me. It's been years since I felt so valued and free." From that moment on, Consuelo began to receive a regular salary from Ruben. For the first time in years, she felt what it was like to have financial autonomy. She could buy clothes for her daughter, choose new books to read, and even save money for the future without feeling dependent or needing permission. This new freedom brought a sparkle to Consuelo's eyes, and she felt more confident and secure. Ruben's kindness and respect not only provided her with a safe home, but also the opportunity to rebuild her life with dignity and independence. Over time, the relationship between Ruben and Consuelo became more intimate and affectionate. Ruben enjoyed spending time with Clara, Consuelo's daughter, and they often went out for walks together. During those moments, Ruben shared his passion for architecture with Consuelo, and she showed a genuine interest, absorbing every word. Consuelo also dedicated herself to reading the books Ruben recommended, deepening their connection further. The affection they shared began to transform into something deeper. In her heart, Consuelo already felt in love with Ruben, but kept her feelings to herself, unsure of how to proceed. One day, Ruben found himself talking to his father about his feelings. Sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Ruben said, "Dad, I think I'm in love with Consuelo. It's the first time in years that I've felt this way, but I don't know how to act." His father, with an understanding smile, looked at him. "Son, life is too short for doubts. If you feel this way about Consuelo, you should tell her. You deserve to be happy." Ruben reflected on his father's words. "Do you really think so? What if she doesn't feel the same? You'll never know if you don't try, and from what I see, the way she looks at you says a lot," his father encouraged, inspired by his own advice. Encouraged by his father's advice, Ruben decided to talk to Consuelo. He wanted to express his feelings and find out if the affection he felt was mutual. With a mix of nervousness and hope, he planned how he would broach the subject with Consuelo, wishing more than anything that she would share his feelings. That night, after putting Clara to bed, Consuelo sat in the living room reading when Ruben approached. He sat down beside her, his heart beating heavily in his chest. The comfortable silence was interrupted by his soft but hesitant voice. "Consuelo, can I talk to you about something important?" Ruben began, looking into her eyes. Consuelo set the book aside and turned to him, her expression attentive. Of course, Ruben. What's on your mind? Ruben took a deep breath, summoning courage. Lately, I've been feeling something more for you, more than just friendship. You've brought a new light into my life and into this house. I care about you and Clara more than I imagined I would. Consuelo felt her heart race, surprised and excited by his words. Ruben, I also feel something for you. You've been amazing to us, she replied, her voice trembling. Ruben took her hand. Consuelo, I want to be here for you not only as a friend, but as someone who truly cares. I would love to explore this further with you, Ruben finished, his voice filled with hope. Consuelo's eyes sparkled with emotion as she gazed into Ruben's eyes. I would like that too, Ruben, she said softly, her heart overflowing with happiness. With a sense of relief and joy, Ruben pulled Consuelo into a warm embrace, feeling a rush of warmth and affection between them. In that moment, they both knew that their bond was more than just friendship. It was the beginning of a beautiful love story. As they held each other, surrounded by the quiet comfort of their home, Ruben and Consuelo felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. They knew that they were embarking on a new chapter of their lives, one filled with love, companionship, and the promise of a bright future together. And so, in the quiet embrace of their shared home, Ruben and Consuelo began their journey of love, knowing that with each passing day, their bond would only grow stronger. As the stars twinkled in the night sky outside, casting a soft glow over their home, Ruben and Consuelo knew that they had found something truly special. A love that would withstand the test of time and fill their lives with endless joy and happiness. And so, with hearts full of love and hope, Ruben and Consuelo embarked on their new journey together, knowing that their love would guide them through every twist and turn that life had in store. As they looked forward to the future, hand in hand, Ruben and Consuelo knew that no matter what challenges they may face, as long as they had each other, they would always find their way back home, to the warmth and love that they had found in each other's arms. In the following days, the relationship between Consuelo and Mr. Ramirez, Ruben's father, grew closer. He had a vast collection of books, and with great enthusiasm, he began to show Consuelo those he considered most interesting. Mr. Ramirez picked up an old book and said, "This was one of my favorites when I was younger. I think you'll like it, Consuelo." Consuelo took the book, flipping through its yellowed pages. "It seems fascinating. Thank you for sharing this with me, Mr. Ramirez," she said. Realizing the special connection forming between them and Consuelo's dedication, Ruben decided to forego the need for a caregiver for his father. Consuelo had insisted on taking care of Mr. Ramirez when Ruben was not at home, and she did so with a mix of respect and affection. Mr. Ramirez greatly appreciated her company, as did his daughter Clara. Consuelo always emphasized how much she enjoyed her new life. "I really enjoy taking care of your father, Ruben. He has been so kind to me and my daughter. It's the least I can do," Consuelo said. Ruben thanked her with a nod. "You are already part of the family, Consuelo. My father and I are very grateful to have you and your daughter here." As Consuelo settled into Ruben's home, he made sure to offer her not only a home, but also financial independence. One day, while they were chatting in the kitchen, Ruben broached the subject. "Consuelo, I've been thinking," he began. "I would like to pay you a salary. You've been incredible at taking care of my father in the house, and I think it's important for you to have your own income." Surprised, Consuelo looked at him. "That's not necessary, Ruben. You're already providing a home and everything my daughter and I need." "I know, but it's important to me that you feel free and independent," Ruben insisted. "I want you to be able to buy whatever you need for yourself and your daughter without having to ask." Consuelo felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Ruben. This means a lot to me. I haven't felt this valued and free in years." From that moment on, Consuelo began receiving a regular salary from Ruben. For the first time in years, she felt what it was like to have financial autonomy. She could buy clothes for her daughter, choose new books to read, and even save money for the future without feeling dependent or needing permission. This new freedom brought a sparkle to Consuelo's eyes, and she felt more confident and secure. Ruben's kindness and respect not only provided her with a safe home, but also the opportunity to rebuild her life with dignity and independence. Over time, the relationship between Ruben and Consuelo became more intimate and affectionate. Ruben enjoyed spending time with Clara, Consuelo's daughter, and they often went out together for walks. During those moments, Ruben shared his passion for architecture with Consuelo, and she showed a genuine interest, absorbing every word. Consuelo also devoted herself to reading the books Ruben recommended, deepening their connection. The affection they shared began to transform into something deeper. In her heart, Consuelo already felt in love with Ruben, but she kept her feelings to herself, unsure of how to proceed. One day, Ruben found himself talking to his father about his feelings. They sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Dad," Ruben said, "I think I'm in love with Consuelo. It's the first time in years that I've felt this way, but I don't know how to act." Ruben's father looked at him with a compassionate smile. "Son, life is too short for doubts. If you feel this way about Consuelo, you should tell her. You deserve to be happy." Ruben pondered his father's words. "But what if she doesn't feel the same way? I'll never know if I don't try." Ruben's father encouraged him, inspired by his own advice. Ruben decided that he would talk to Consuelo. He wanted to express his feelings and find out if the affection he felt was mutual. With a mix of nervousness and hope, Ruben planned how he would broach the subject with Consuelo, wishing more than anything that she would share his feelings. That night, after putting Clara to bed, Consuelo sat in the living room reading. When Ruben approached, he sat beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. The comfortable silence was interrupted by his soft but hesitant voice. "Consuelo, can I talk to you about something important?" Ruben began, looking into her eyes. Consuelo set the book aside and turned to him, an expression of attentiveness on her face. "Of course, Ruben. What's on your mind?" Ruben took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Lately, I've been feeling something more for you than just friendship. You've brought a new light into my life in this house. I care about you and Clara more than I ever imagined I could." Consuelo felt her heart race, surprised and touched by his words. "Ruben, I've also been feeling something for you. You've been amazing with us," she replied, her voice trembling. Ruben took her hand. "Consuelo, I want to be here for you, not just as a friend, but as someone who truly cares. I would love to be a part of Clara's life, to take care of her as if she were my own daughter." Consuelo felt tears forming in her eyes, moved by Ruben's sincerity. "That means a lot to me, Clara and me. We already see you as part of our family." From that night on, the relationship between Ruben and Consuelo flourished. As Consuelo began attending social and professional events with Ruben, people's reactions varied. There were malicious comments circulating, some referring to Consuelo derogatorily as the beggar whom Ruben had taken in. In various places, people looked at them disdainfully, murmuring among themselves. However, Ruben remained indifferent to those judgments, always by Consuelo's side, who felt increasingly confident and secure with him. At one of these events, an elegant cocktail party at an art gallery, Mrs. Sandra, a well-known figure in Ruben's social circle, approached the couple with a polite smile. She greeted them warmly. "Ruben, Consuelo, it's a pleasure to see you here. I've heard about your relationship, and I want to congratulate you," she said, maintaining a cordial demeanor. Consuelo thanked her, feeling tense under Sandra's scrutinizing gaze. There was something about the way Sandra looked at her that made her uncomfortable, but Consuelo kept her composure. Sandra continued, still with her critical gaze fixed on Consuelo. "It's always a pleasant surprise to see new faces at our events, Consuelo. You have a very unique air about you." "Thank you, Mrs. Sandra," Consuelo replied politely. "Before I forget, I'd like to invite you both to a dinner at my house next week. It would be a pleasure to host you," Sandra said, looking at both of them. Ruben hesitated for a moment, feeling a certain moral obligation to accept the invitation. Despite not being particularly excited about the idea, he exchanged a quick glance with Consuelo, seeking her silent opinion before responding. "It would be a pleasure, Mrs. Sandra. We accept the invitation," Ruben said, offering a polite smile. Sandra seemed satisfied with the response. "I'm looking forward to having you over. It will be a lovely evening." "Until then," she said before walking away, leaving Ruben and Consuelo alone again. As soon as she was gone, Ruben looked at Consuelo. "I'm sorry, I thought we should accept. I hope it's okay with you," he said, sounding a bit concerned. Consuelo nodded, supporting his decision. "It's okay, Ruben. I think it will be an interesting experience," she replied, trying to sound optimistic. Together, they continued to enjoy the event, although the prospect of dinner at Sandra's house remained in their minds, mixing feelings of curiosity and caution. The day of the dinner at Mrs. Sandra's house arrived, and Ruben and Consuelo prepared for the occasion. Upon arrival, they were impressed by the beauty and grandeur of the house. It was evident that Sandra was a renowned architect. Every detail of the decoration was carefully planned and executed to perfection. The aesthetics were impeccable, blending modern and classical art harmoniously. Upon entering, Sandra welcomed them warmly and invited them to sit. Consuelo, while admiring the interior, couldn't help but notice a certain emptiness in the atmosphere. Despite the beauty, the house seemed to lack warmth and coziness. Sandra lived alone in that huge mansion, and the space didn't convey the feeling of a happy home. "What a beautiful house, Mrs. Sandra," Consuelo commented, trying not to show her perception of the atmosphere. "Thank you, Consuelo. I put a lot of effort into every detail," Sandra responded with a proud smile. Sandra watched Consuelo attentively, with an enigmatic expression on her face. At one point, she began to talk about her personal life, revealing details of a difficult past. She mentioned how life had been unfair to her in her youth, leaving Ruben and Consuelo confused about the purpose of that conversation. Ruben, sensing that there was something deeper behind Sandra's words, asked her to be clearer. "Mrs. Sandra, excuse me, but I'm a bit confused. Could you explain why you invited us to dinner tonight?" Sandra sighed deeply as if gathering courage and got up to take a photo album. When she returned, she opened the album and showed a photo of herself from many years ago, visibly pregnant. Ruben and Consuelo looked at the photo, still not understanding the context. "Where is the child?" Ruben asked, trying to connect the dots. Sandra, with tears in her eyes, looked directly at Consuelo. "The child is here. It's you, Consuelo." Ruben and Consuelo were shocked by the revelation. Consuelo looked at the photo and then at Sandra, trying to process the magnitude of those words. "Am I your daughter?" Consuelo asked, her voice trembling with emotion. The revelation that she was Consuelo's mother hit them like a bomb, leaving everyone at the table in a state of shock. Ruben expressed his disbelief. "That seems impossible, Sandra. Consuelo never knew her mother. How can you be sure she's your daughter?" Consuelo, still trying to process the situation, looked alternately at Ruben and Sandra, unable to formulate words. The idea that the woman sitting in front of her could be her mother was something she had never imagined. Sandra, with tears in her eyes, began to tell her story. When she was young, she met Consuelo's father. He seemed like a good man, despite his problems with alcohol. They were together and she became pregnant. But after Consuelo was born, he changed. He became aggressive, and the day they left the hospital, he took her away, disappearing without a trace. Sandra tried everything to find her, hiring investigators, spending fortunes, but it was as if they had evaporated. There were no traces, no clues that could lead her to her daughter. Consuelo, absorbing every word, felt a mix of emotions. Anger at her mother's absence in her life, battled against understanding the pain and desperation Sandra had experienced. "So the man who raised me stole me from you?" Consuelo asked, her voice trembling at the magnitude of that revelation. Sandra nodded, tears rolling freely. "Yes, Consuelo, he took away the greatest treasure of my life, and I have spent all these years searching for you." Feeling the tension of the conversation, Consuelo, still stunned by the revelation, looked directly at Sandra and asked, "How can you be so sure I'm your daughter? Why only now?" Sandra, with an expression of relief mixed with pain, responded, "When I first saw you at the event with Ruben, something stirred within me, a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. You have a birthmark on your hand exactly like mine. That was the last physical sign I remembered of you." Sandra continued, her voice choked with emotion. "After that day, I asked an investigator I've worked with for years to find out everything about you. The pieces began to fit together. He finally found your father, who was drunk on a street, a shadow of the man I knew. The investigator approached him, offering more drinks, And at that moment, he got your father to talk. That's how he confessed everything, telling the truth about how he had taken you from me, the fact that you were never officially registered, for him not to be found. He was completely out of his mind, living hidden, trying to erase any trace that could lead me to you. Consuelo listened in silence, absorbing every word. Each detail was like a veil slowly lifting from her life, revealing hidden truths she had never imagined possible. He lived a life in hiding, afraid of being found, and he kept me in that shadow with him, Consuelo said, understanding the magnitude of what Sandra was relating. Ruben, looking at Consuelo and then at Sandra, expressed his surprise. It's an incredible story. Difficult to believe all this, Consuelo, he said. Consuelo, her voice choked with emotion, said, I never imagined that something like this could be happening in my life. It's a lot to absorb. Sandra, her eyes filled with tears, nodded. I know, dear. It's a shock for all of us. She then added, despite everything he did, I asked them to take your father to a supportive home. There he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He will spend the rest of his life there. Ruben, trying to better understand the situation, asked, did you do that even after all he did to you and Consuelo? Sandra sighed deeply and responded, yes, despite everything, he's a sick human being, deserving of compassion. I spent years with a lot of anger towards him, but today, seeing my daughter here in front of me, the happiness I feel, it's overwhelming. I can't think of anything bad from now on. Consuelo looked at Sandra, a feeling of gratitude mixed with confusion in her heart. Thank you for that, Sandra. I'm still trying to understand everything, but I appreciate that you took care of him. Despite everything he did to me, he's still my father. After these revelations and encounters, the bond between Consuelo, Ruben, and Sandra deepened, creating a new family dynamic filled with love, forgiveness, and hope. Excitingly, Consuelo's life changed radically. She began visiting Sandra's house regularly, and both of them made efforts to rebuild the relationship they had lost. During one of their frequent visits to Sandra's house, Consuelo felt the joy of a new beginning. In a moment of intimate conversation, Sandra expressed her wishes for Consuelo's future. Do you still have an interest in further studies, Consuelo? She asked, serving on the terrace of her spacious house. Consuelo, with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, replied, yes, I've always dreamed of studying architecture, but never had the opportunity. Sandra smiled warmly and said, then I think it's time to make that dream come true. I want you to enroll in the best architecture school in the country. I'll take care of everything. Consuelo was speechless for a moment, overcome with emotion. Would you do that for me? I don't know how to thank you, she said, tears of gratitude welling up in her eyes. Sandra reached across the table, taking Consuelo's hand. After all we've lost, it's the least I can do. And there's more, Sandra continued. I'm building a room for Clarina here at home. I'll be there for every moment of her growth. Something I sadly missed with you. Consuelo, now openly crying, felt a mix of happiness and relief. That means so much to me, Sandra. Clarina will be thrilled to have a grandmother like you. In one of their many warm encounters, the conversation between Consuelo and Sandra took an emotionally profound turn. While Clarina played in the garden, Sandra confided in Consuelo, my greatest dream after finding you would be to be a loving mother to you. But I understand that all of this is very recent, and I respect your time. I'll do whatever it takes to deserve that title. Moved by Sandra's words, Consuelo replied sincerely, you're already doing so much, Sandra. I appreciate every gesture of yours. I'm sure we'll become closer and closer as time goes by. As time passed, their relationship strengthened naturally and organically. Consuelo regularly visited Sandra's house, where Clarina enjoyed spending time. The little one, completely at ease in Sandra's presence, filled the house with her laughter and joy, creating a familial atmosphere that had long been missing in Sandra's and Consuelo's lives. Several years went by, and Consuelo, now nearing the end of her architecture course, prepared for the big day of her graduation. Having faced many challenges and overcome countless adversities, she was about to celebrate a significant milestone in her life. The graduation ceremony was packed with professors, family, and friends, all gathered to witness Consuelo's success. As Consuelo walked down the aisle toward the stage, she felt a mix of pride and gratitude. Her eyes scanned the audience, looking for three special people: her husband, who had always supported her unconditionally; her father-in-law, who had become a constant paternal figure in her life; and of course, Sandra, her greatest advocate in architecture. Stepping onto the stage, Consuelo looked at the audience and began her speech. "Today I'm here not only because of my efforts, but also thanks to the invaluable support of very special people," she said, her voice full of emotion. "My husband, who has always been by my side, encouraging me to achieve my goals. My father-in-law, who welcomed me as a daughter and gave me strength in difficult times." Then her eyes found Sandra and she paused before saying, "And of course, my dear mother, Sandra. Mom, you gave me more than the opportunity to study. You gave me a home love and the family I always wished for." Consuelo's words deeply touched everyone present, especially Sandra, who couldn't contain her tears, covering her face with her hands, overcome with emotion. Hearing Consuelo refer to her as Mom touched her heart in a way she had never experienced before. She felt a wave of love, gratitude, and a profound sense of fulfillment. The years of searching, the pain of separation, and the uncertainty had finally given way to a moment of pure joy and connection. As soon as the ceremony ended, Sandra approached Consuelo and the two embraced tightly, a hug that sealed years of distance and solidified their relationship. "My daughter," Sandra whispered, "you have completed me in a way I never imagined possible." Consuelo, holding Sandra, replied, "Mom, you showed me the true meaning of family and love. I'm so grateful for everything." They left the graduation ceremony hand in hand, feeling renewed and hopeful for the future. Both knew that from that moment on, their lives would be immensely happier. Their story was a testimony to the fact that maternal love surpasses all barriers and that a mother never gives up on her child, no matter what life throws their way. If you've enjoyed this story, we ask you to like and subscribe to our channel. This helps us continue to bring incredible stories to you almost every day. Don't miss the next story that's about to appear on your screen. Thank you very much for your support. See you soon.